Hey everybody, Norm here from Tested at Monsterpalooza 2019. Now I'm joined by Eric of Aurum FX, and you guys are a prop company that you work with game companies to turn things like pistols from Destiny into real props.
We've got a small team of guys that from all sorts of backgrounds. Like my partner Derek has worked at Legacy Effects for 10 years. He was painting stuff for like Iron Man and the Avengers and everything. So we've got over 20 years of combined experience, and and then we started our own company.
I mean, the finish work is really what caught my eye here. Can we pick up some of these pieces and start taking a look at them?
Oh, here, let's look at the last word. Shows a little bit more variety because the gold finish is kind of an elaborate process to get that sheen, and then Derek knocks the wood grain out of the park, and then everything from the black and the filigrees to the wood handle and the gold finish is everything has its own process.
So walk me through the making of something like this. Because you're working directly with game companies, they provide some assets for you to work with. Are these the in-game assets or like the cutscene assets? Or?
So we most of the time will work with the high-res assets for the game, because the game res is useful. They don't always have the high-res assets. Fortunately, our partners do provide high-res assets, and we're able to take that and port it into our programs, and it's a procedure to get that ready to print, because when they're designing for the game, they're not designing it for 3D printing.
Sure.
So
it's
a
airtight.
Exactly, not at all. And so you got to make sure everything's manifold. You got to make sure the parts are going to fit together. There's no parts cutting into each other. Then you got to think about, if you're going to have moving parts, how are all the moving parts going to integrate into each other? So that is its own process. Other times we'll get game res files, which sometimes you can bump that up to higher poly count and ZBrush and get a good model out of that. But a lot of times we'll have to go in and make our own models, or we also have a really great modeler who does a lot of work for us. So it varies from project to project.
I love that it doesn't look like you have any compromises on the game assets. All the holes and overhangs they're all there. How hard does that make then the mold making challenge after you print this out and start finishing that?
This one in particular wasn't made with the game assets. This was actually based on a concept art for the Thorn that we went and created our own model for.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of the times when we do get a model, we have to anticipate the needs of the project. So if we are going to be molding it, for example, we have to make sure that the parts that are the really, really tiny filigrees and recessed areas won't pull silicone when we're demolding it. Certain undercuts we'll have to compensate for, or we will have to split it up into multiple pieces to allow for high fidelity castings. A good example is the Ace of Spades from Destiny, which has close to, it has a lot of pieces that went into this, but if you can see the shroud on the top of the weapon, it's actually its own separate piece, which allows for the most accurate representation of what came out of the game. So this was one piece, the frame here is one piece, the grip is one piece, the bottom of the grip is another piece. So this was all molded and cast, and we did that because if we just did it as one solid piece, you'd have too many little undercuts, and demolding it would be a nightmare.
And then in terms of the paint, are you experimenting with different finishes? Are you doing a lot of test paint ups before you decide on what's going to be best for each prop?
So we've done so many iterations with different finishes over the past few years that we're pretty comfortable. When we'll get that turnarounds, and we sit down and we take a look and say, hey, I think this needs a certain finish. I think this part needs a different finish. Maybe we'll split those pieces up, and that's part of what we try to. We want to accomplish the most believable replicas that we can possibly make, and part of that is separating each part as if it's a different material.
Yeah.
So if the gold is made of a different material, we want to make that its own piece. So when we're painting it and assembling it, it just adds a little bit of extra believability and realism.
I love the chamber also rotates. You have detachable ones with magnets. Or you're thinking about ways to incorporate more not real functionality, but just mechanical action or even electronics. And
it adds a little bit of the extra pizzazz, that just kind of makes it more you're holding it in your hand and you want to feel like this piece could have been unearthed in some like archaeological discovery, or it was in some battle like 100 years in the future maybe, but that's something we want to try to do. We don't put moving triggers because it's not always convention safe, and like you run into issues with that sometimes, so yeah.
They're clearly science fiction fantasy pieces.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. What's next on your slate, your studio? You can say it's
a lot of stuff we can't talk about, but I will say we are doing more weapons and stuff, but what we're moving into is more media. We want to do a lot more live action media, so well, that's what we had playing on a reel. So we're working on a series, a YouTube series, like imagine like a chef's table of prop making and replica making. So
awesome.
That's what's next.
I can't wait. Looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you,
It's a pleasure
Norm.
to meet
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for coming by.